Hello everyone and welcome to Youth Vote 2012 here on the campus of Wartburg College in Waverly. To everyone here in our live studio audience, everybody watching at home or in the classroom, we want to thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ron Steele of KWWL News.
And I'm Jacqueline Schutte with Wartburg Television. Today we'll be hosting a discussion on the most important issues facing young voters.
Now before I tell you some of the topics we'll be discussing today, I want to point out that this entire 90-minute program is being produced in its entirety by the great students here in the electronic media department at Wartburg College in Waverly. I think by the end of the show you'll say they have done a terrific job in organizing this. We're going to talk about many key issues facing our voters: education, the cost of tuition, college, the national debt, the economy, and LGBT issues and rights here today on this program.
And after we've talked about the issues, we'll bring in representatives from both the Obama and Romney campaign for discussion. We'll also be joined by a representative from Bruce Braley's congressional campaign and Braley's Republican opponent, Ben Lang. And to all of our students watching, we'd love you to become part of the conversation. Tori Jockums of the Wartburg Circuit joins us now to let you know how you can get involved.
We're excited to have over 700 students watching across eastern Iowa this morning, and we want to get you all involved in the conversation. So go to wartburgcircuit.org/youthvote where you can chat live with us during the show. Ask questions to our guest experts and campaign representatives, and we'll answer them live on the air.
All right, Tori, thank you so much. We're going to begin with a tremendous topic for you young people. It's education. Wartburg Television's Danny Householder is here to tell you what you need to know as a student about today's educational process and, of course, how it relates to the election. Danny.
Thanks, Ron. Young adults hoping to get a college education are struggling more than with just their homework. Here's a look at the financial issues that hit our country's college students.
Welcome to college. A lot happens here. You decide what you want to do for a career, you find your best friends, maybe even your future spouse. College is supposed to be the time of your life, but you might spend your whole life paying for it because college is expensive. College Board reports this year, on average, a four-year public school will cost an in-state student $22,261, and the typical private college price is a staggering $43,289 per year. For the students who think they can manage that kind of bill for 4 years, listen to this. The National Center for Education Statistics says almost half of undergraduates take more than 6 years to finish a 4-year degree. So when students are handed their diploma, they receive one more reminder of college: debt. Iowa College Aid says students who graduated in 2011 left four-year schools $29,184 in debt. That gives our state the sixth highest student debt rate in the country. According to some experts, student debt is a major concern. The Association of American Universities claims that the national student loan debt has topped $900 billion. That's $100 billion more than the country's credit card debt, according to the Department of Consumer Affairs. Regardless of rising student loan debt, a college degree does have clear lifetime earning benefits. Time magazine wrote a person with a 4-year college degree would make 77% more money in a lifetime than someone with a high school diploma.
Joining us now in the studio is Mike Cormack from the Iowa Department of Education and Jeremy Davis from Iowa College Aid.
Let's talk a little bit about these men. First of all, Mike has been the policy liaison for the Department of Education since October of 2011 of last year. He's assisted Governor Branstad, Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds, and their staff on these very, very important educational issues. And Mike is also the public's contact, your contact, for any questions regarding the educational policy in the state of Iowa.
And Jeremy Davis has been with the Iowa College Student Aid Agency for more than 5 years. He's currently completing a doctoral program in education studies at the University of Lincoln, Nebraska. So, Mr. Davis, my first question is for you. Why is college so expensive?
Well, that's a very complex question, actually, and it's not something that can probably really fully discussed in the next 15 minutes. But there's a lot of things that go into college costs, and it's everything from the actual operational cost of the university to the value of what education is. It's also tied to how much funding an institution receives, whether it's a public or private college, like the private colleges here at Wartburg compared to a public institution like Iowa State or a community college. And then there's also the for-profit institutions. So there's a lot of different sectors of education, and so each sector has a different component to its overall cost. And that's what goes into the overall cost that you as a student will pay in tuition, your room and board, and fees that are associated with a college education. So that kind of summarizes it, I think, and sort of encapsulates it about as quick and succinct as I can on that. So.
The main thing about this program today is we want to bring you in and ask the questions. These students, your young people, the demographic we're kind of going after today is kind of 18 to 25. This is a big block of voters across America. And right now, let's go to the studio audience right now. And Serafina Carey, we'll see where you are. You have the next question right here in front row. So Serafina, go ahead.
Are there any plans to reform college tuition fees? The tuition is going up and the economy is faltering, so how are we supposed to pay for college?
I guess I'll take that one. College reform and college education and the costs associated with it, there's a lot of different initiatives that are always tied to that or talked about each year. For example, one of the components that is often talked about to help reduce the cost of college for individuals such as students that are looking to go to college or are currently in college is the amount of grant funding that comes from the federal level through such things as like the federal Pell Grant, which is designed to help low-income students and their families help pay for college more effectively. From a state's perspective, we also allocate about $45 to $50 million a year to students attending different levels of higher education. For example, students that are attending private college in Iowa, they're eligible to receive what's called an Iowa tuition grant, which helps to offset some of that cost of the private colleges in Iowa. As well as if you attend community colleges, there's also some state support that comes along with that, as well as the public sectors of higher education that are state funded as well. Granted, the cost of an education is an investment, and student loan debt is obviously a major issue. With students graduating with over $29,000 in average debt here in Iowa, that is a problem because when you look at us across the board and across the country, Iowa is still one of the top 10 highest student loan debt states in the country, and we need to do something to change that. And so when we work with Governor Branstad's administration, the administration at the DC level, obviously there could be a change with that, and we'll know here in about the next 7 days as to whether there will be a change going from a Democratic administration to a Republican, or whether it'll be staying at the Democratic side of things as well. So there's a lot of different issues at play right now, federal funding, state funding, all those things go along to overall make an impact to what you as students pay as what our 18-year-olds are going to be paying when they come to college this coming fall.
And Mike, why don't you expand on that, because I'm sure you hear from the public on both sides of the aisle politically.
Sure, and I think going back to the cost of education, I think it's important for those who are still currently in high school or watching the program, really take advantage of using your years there to the very utmost of your ability. Certainly the better that you attain academic success at the high school level, that's going to open up scholarship opportunities, more colleges that you can go towards. And we're going to be working towards this next year a college readiness proposal where we're going to actually work with students who are going for the four-year college route, but also work for an endorsement for those who are going on the more technical, vocational technical route. So definitely what was just said there is true. Every vote matters, and definitely policy changes will differ depending on both on the state and federal level who's in control of both administrations and chambers of legislatures in Congress.
All right, and now we have another question from our audience. This one is from Samantha Myers.
Actually, I'm Madeline Earhart.
Okay, Madeline, why don't you tell us where you're from, too, and what school you're representing today here, and hold your mic up a little bit higher.
All right. I'm from Grundy Center High School, and my question is, what's one way to lower tuition costs of college?
One way to lower tuition costs, quite frankly, it starts when you're in middle school and high school. It starts with working with your parents. It's having your parents also talk to you about, what their financial situation is, what your family's situation is, and what you might be able to afford going into college. But then it goes back to you as a student. And that's where you always hear teachers, such as our individual here in the room with us, is always saying, work hard, study hard, invest yourself into your education. And as you work hard as a student and get good grades, being involved in community activities opens your eligibility up for a lot of college scholarships that are available to you as high school students and especially as high school seniors. We're going to get those scholarships, whether they be from the private, nonprofit entities, the foundations, even the schools you're going to be attending. Those help reduce the overall cost of your education. And so we really encourage you to start planning early, reaching out to look at for those resources, and then applying for them in a timely manner and working to get those, because that will really help reduce your overall cost of education as well from you as an individual.
All right, thank you very much. Tori, what kind of questions are we getting from students in the classroom today?
Our question that we just got is, the price of college has gone up for many years. Now with the state budget surplus, will this continue?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. It depends when you're looking at the state budget surplus. Obviously, that's going to come down to a lot of a legislative directive, and Michael talked a little about that. One thing you may have heard recently is that the Iowa Board of Regents, which is the governing entity for the three state public institutions, University of Iowa, University of Northern Iowa, and Iowa State, recently proposed to freeze tuition for the upcoming year. That's going to be a benefit if they're able to get that accomplished and really help contain those costs at those institutions. From the state's perspective with private colleges, it's going to depend on where the state legislature determines the funding will be at for such things like the Iowa Tuition Grant, the Iowa Vocational Grants, which go to a lot of the community college students, as well as the Iowa Grant Program, which is eligible for all students, and then of course there's the Iowa Opportunity Scholarship, which is also eligible for students. So a lot of it's going to come down to funding and what the state's able to do. I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he can talk a little more about the policy-driven side with the state legislature.
Well, in the Department of Education where I work at, sometimes folks just think it has to do with kindergarten through senior year of high school. We actually have a division of community colleges, and that's certainly something that is an important facet of education, in fact, the fastest growing in our state. So the level of funding that they receive, and it seems like on a bipartisan basis, there's strong support for community colleges at this time. I could very much see that they'll continue to get a focal point of the new spending. Again, it comes down to in December, our state looking at how much revenue we do actually have, what future obligations that they have to pay for. But I think it is likely that you're going to see a mix of different policy issues out there, maybe some tax cutting, some help in some of the budget areas that are not educational. But I would expect education both on the K-12 level and on the post-secondary level to have a very good year because the revenues have been underestimated in the past year. So the state of Iowa does have more money in the bank than was anticipated. Hopefully it can go to do a lot of good public policy works across the state.
All right, thank you gentlemen so much. You were right. We could spend another 24 hours talking about this for sure. We're going to step aside for a couple of minutes though, and we'll be back with our continuing discussion, this time on national debt and the economy and how that's all figuring in this very important election coming up in a week.
And to all the schools watching in the classroom, we want you to be part of our discussion.
A few decisions in life are big. Your first car, your dream home, your career, who to share your life with. The best choices feel right in your heart and make sense in your head. Choosing a college belongs on that list too. These big decisions, the life changers, are best when they promise dependability, stability, and possibility. Wartburg College promises all three. Like the mighty fortress for which it's named, Wartburg has weathered the storms and withstood the test of time. When others falter, Wartburg builds anew. When uncertainty rocks the world, Wartburg stands strong. When others lose their way, Wartburg remembers its core values. Do something right for your head and your heart. Choose Wartburg College. Leadership, service, faith, learning. Wartburg College. Online at wartburg.edu.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
Topic: national debt. National debt has reached record highs this year, and that could fall on the shoulders of today's youth for years to come. Now let's take a look at the numbers that make up this national debt.
You may have heard the term $16 trillion in debt floating around in this year's election. If the government continues to spend more than it brings in through taxes, the national debt will continue to rise. The government can't completely stop spending, so in recent history, the national debt has risen because there hasn't been enough revenue brought in. Let's take a look at the last 8 years. According to the United States Treasury, since the end of 2004, the national debt has risen from $7.5 trillion to just over $16 trillion today. By the end of this year, the national debt is projected to be right around $16.4 trillion. That's an increase of just over $1 trillion per year. And if this trend continues, the national debt will be just over $20 trillion by the end of 2016. The problem comes when trying to figure out how to start to manage that debt. There are two basic ways to make sure the debt starts to decrease. According to the U.S. Treasury, the government spent around $3.5 trillion in 2011, which is roughly $1 trillion more than the revenue brought in through taxes. Simply put, to cover the cost of the spending, either taxes have to go up or the spending has to come down. There are, however, ways to control how much spending the government can do. Debated by both parties is the topic of setting a balanced budget. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, once a budget is set in place, it works like a guidebook for government officials. It lets them know how much to spend, where to spend it, and how much to bring in through taxes. Another hot topic, the debt ceiling, essentially a firm spending cap for the government. The topic of raising the debt ceiling or raising the amount the country is able to go into debt is a big issue in this year's election.
Joining us now in the studio is Tom Coates of Consumer Credit Union of Des Moines and Dave Swenson, a professor of economics at Iowa State University.
And we also welcome Mark Hanewald of United Equipment Accessories. Mr. Hanewald is the president of this company, United Equipment Accessories, a major employer right here in the Cedar Valley. He's also a member of the executive board of the Iowa Association of Business and Industry.
Tom Coates is the president and co-founder of Consumer Credit of Des Moines, which is Iowa's largest credit counseling service. Tom graduated from Simpson College with a degree in accounting and business and is a veteran of the investment brokering industry.
David Swenson is an associate scientist of economics at Iowa State University. He's also a lecturer at the University of Iowa. In fact, he's worked closely with both of these great institutions since 1983. And Professor Swenson has also given many talks throughout the state about what's been happening with the recent recession and how it truly impacts individual Iowans.
Mr. Coates, the first question is for you. How does the national debt affect young voters?
Well, I think the national debt affects all voters, and I don't think that that the young people are going to be exempt at all in regards to $16 trillion that we're looking at, or whether you combine all of the debt up, municipalities, state, federal, private. It's over $50 trillion when you multiply everything. And that's a level of indebtedness that is overwhelming to the average person. I think if they did understand it, it would be a reduction in the enthusiasm for some of the programs that are out there.
Let's go to the audience real quickly. Dan Hawk, are you with us here, right here in the front row? Tell us where you're from.
My name's Dan Hack, and I'm a freshman at Wartburg College here. And my question for you guys is, what steps are being taken to strengthen our economy?
I'll jump in. Well, first of all, we have an incredibly weak economy right now that's slowly recovering. And what I try to tell people is everybody wants this to be your father's recession, but it hasn't been your father's recession, it's been your grandfather's depression. And what we're trying to recover from is something worse than we've seen in my adult life and in my entire life. Now, what are we trying to do to strengthen the economy? Well, the first thing we're trying to do in the United States is slowly recover from the debt burden that he just talked about. It's not just the government debt burden, it's the household debt burden. That household debt burden prevents us from consuming, and it also prevents other businesses from expanding because there just isn't the consumer demand. The next thing we're trying to do with regard to making our economy be something to have pride in as we go forward is make more smart people. More skills, more technical skills, more scientific skills, but nonetheless more smart people so that we're more competitive in the state and we're more competitive nationwide.
And Mr. Hanewald, you own a business, so you are directly impacted by what's happening with this economic situation. How is it impacting you and what's ahead?
Well, I think the irony of this recession is that it is not uniform. Mm-hmm. And we have seen on a statewide basis that I'm familiar with, you'll have people in the housing sector that are extremely depressed right now. But by the same token, there are many manufacturers such as ourselves that have weathered the recession fairly well and are continuing to grow. And so, but that's not atypical in an economic recovery, that you will see a ratcheting of recovery. So.
All right, thank you very much.
And now we're going to head over to Tori for a question from one of our schools watching today.
Our next question is, what all would happen if the national debt would reach the debt ceiling without Congress approving of raising the ceiling to a higher level?
I'll jump on that one too. What happens is the debt ceiling is the statutory limit to how much money that we can borrow. If we get to the point where we cannot borrow money, there are a couple of things that are going to happen. First of all, we're going to have to start shrinking government, and by default we'd shrink government, which means you're going to shrink the economy because government is part of the economy. The other thing that we run the risk of is threatening what's called our full faith and credit, our willingness to pay and or pledge to pay on our debts. And that affects the financial markets much more broadly, and we worry about that as well.
Tom, I know that your organization, I know people personally that you have helped, and I mean in a tremendous way, taking enormous amounts of debt and getting rid of it. But realistically, can this $16 trillion in debt ever be paid?
Well, and it's not just the $16 trillion. And we haven't even touched on the entitlement issue, which is another $80 trillion in unfunded liabilities. I don't think when we talk about the issue between the growth exponentially of government and the amount of spending that we've done, and when we talk, I know you're going to get to taxes, it's not realistic to expect that we can increase taxes enough to deal with this issue. It has to be a spending issue. People come into our office all the time, and just from an individual standpoint, you know, they say, well, if I can only make a little bit more money, and yet I find that no matter how much most people make, they find ways to spend it. Same with the government.
Okay, thank you.
And next we're going to go to a question from our studio audience.
My name is Miranda Powell, and I was wondering, what will the economy look like in the next 5 years?
Well, I'll start again. The economy over the next depends on what, there are lots of economies. We have community economies, state economies, and national economies. We're going to start at the national level. Right now, our economy is recovering, but it's recovering slowly. Many of the things that got us into trouble before, we're unwinding ourselves from, and the economy is starting slowly to behave what we want the economy to be, expanding slowly, starting to produce new goods and services in the manufacturing sector, starting to have something of a more normal relationship between production and consumption. We expect the economy to grow slowly at least for the next 5 to 6 years, but there's no evidence that the economy is going to expand. Now, where's the economy going to grow most? It's going to grow most in healthcare and healthcare services. It's going to grow most in the areas of financial and business services. More growth we expect in manufacturing and broadly in the services sector.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Did you ever think there'd be a time we'd be borrowing so much money from China? That's mind-boggling to a lot of people right now. Let's go back and talk to Tori about our questions coming from the classroom.
Okay, our next question comes from Lowther Academy, and they would like to know why Iowa is in so much debt.
Well, I'm assuming you're talking about Iowa state government or Iowa as householders. What do you think? Well,
Iowa householders actually have a lower rate of debt than than the states throughout the country, which is somewhat gratifying. The amount of the average household debt from a credit card standpoint is about $8,000. Iowa has closer to $5,000 per average household. So, and from a state budget standpoint, we have a requirement that the state lawmakers balance their budget on an annual basis. Some of us believe that ought to be perpetrated on the national lawmakers as well.
And we could live in Illinois or California.
Yeah, we could. And remember, we use debt to do things like build dormitories at colleges and underwrite some of our public investments like sewer plants and things like that. That's managed debt. They still have to balance their budget at the end of the year. What's going on at the federal level, though, is debt that's accruing that isn't being paid off the way a local government or a city government or a state government does.
Good distinction.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We're going to come back to you in a minute. We're going to transition right now to another key topic under this umbrella of economics. And Jackie, you've been doing some research on that so tell us what you found.
Yep, that's right. And although numbers say the nation's economy is improving, Employment still remains high. Finding work has proved exceptionally tough for young adults. We now begin an in-depth look at job growth.
Think ahead to graduation day. You've worked hard to get there. If you're going to college, you know you'll have a lot of debt to pay off, so it's nice to know there will be lots of good paying jobs available. Right? Wrong. There are 5 people searching for every 1 job available in America. According to the U.S. Census Bureau's current population survey, over the past 4 years, young adults have had the most difficulty entering the workforce. The percentage of young adults in the labor force is the lowest it's been since 1955. The unemployment rate has doubled in the first quarter of 2010 for workers aged 25 to 34. Our age group has the highest unemployment. According to the Department of Labor Bureau, there were 453,000 fewer young adults working in August than in July of this year. It's not just competition between our age group. Older generations are facing financial struggles and are retiring later. This means fewer jobs for young adults. According to the National Employment Law Project, 60% of jobs cut in the recession were middle-wage jobs like construction, manufacturing, and information technology. Lower-wage jobs like retail and food preparation have had the most growth since the recession. They've added 300,000 workers since June of 2009. Many of these lower-paying entry-level jobs are filled by high school and college graduates. However, those graduates are competing with older workers who may have lost their jobs in the recession. Although it is difficult for college graduates to get jobs in their fields, they have better pay and benefits than those without a degree. But for those without a college education, the outlook is much worse. According to the Economic Policy Institute, entry-level wages for men who graduate from high school is $11. That's $4 less than what wages were in 1979 for the same jobs. In 1979, over 60% of entry-level jobs offered health insurance. Now, only 20% do. Numbers released earlier this month revealed the unemployment rate has decreased, but according to the U.S. Labor Department, it's not exactly all good news. The lower numbers mean almost 400,000 people stopped looking for jobs. Many of these people were ages 16 to 24.
Very interesting, Jackie. It really is. We have 3 gentlemen here again with us. Professor Dave Swenson from Iowa State is here. Tom Coates, Mark Hannawalt. You've heard Jackie's report there, and the situation about these young people want to find jobs that are high paying. What advice can you give them, given the status of today's economy?
Well, the first thing I want to talk a little bit about the story that we just heard. It said 400,000 people have left the labor force because they're discouraged. There's good news in there. It's not just that they were discouraged, it's because they were older. You see, the baby boomers are retiring, and they're retiring at a faster rate than we're replacing with young people. And so we have more exiting the labor force than coming in. So there is a rosy outlook out there. The problem is the people retiring have senior positions, you don't qualify for those. But there's going to be a move in that direction.
Well, and that's part of it. Also, the jobs that are gained versus those that are lost, and in large part what Dave is saying, is because those new jobs are paying a lot less. And so a job is not a job necessarily, it's also how much revenue is being generated for those households by the jobs, because people that have lost jobs oftentimes have to take lower paying jobs, so they now have a job, but it doesn't go as far.
Yeah, I'd add also that I think it depends on where your field is. What I'm familiar with manufacturing, what we call the mid-skilled jobs that come out of the tech schools, and many of those jobs are in very high demand.
Right.
And then, of course, the engineering, which we're in a very engineering-driven company, it's always a struggle to find engineers. So it's like in any economy, again, there are certain professions that seem to lead or lag, and I would say right now that the technical fields are doing well.
And can you explain how does a college education benefit someone who is looking for a job?
Well, first of all, it puts you to the front of the line. Now you've got twin evils. You have the supposition that you're overqualified for certain types of job, and the other problem, though, when you have a college-educated job or a college education and you take a job, one of the problems with it is the worry that if you start too low, you'll have trouble getting back on the track you thought you were going to be on. And it may give you an entry into a job over other people, but it also may lock you into a level of employment and skill building that doesn't suit you in the long run.
Well, and I think it's a supply-demand issue, too. Keep in mind, you need to focus in, as Mark said, about the discipline that you have. When I went to school in college back in the 70s, it was less than 40% of high school graduates received any college. Now it's 2/3. And so you've got a tremendous supply. You've got more competition for college graduates, so you better focus in, as Dave said, in some of the disciplines that the marketplace is demanding.
And Mark, we're not asking you to take a position here of either candidate, but when you hear a candidate promise they're going to create 12 million jobs or 30 million jobs or 200,000 jobs, do you believe them?
No. Flat out, no. I mean, you know, the reality is that especially presidential candidates and whether they're governors or whatever, it makes good press, but they have very little control over job creation at all. And so just be very, very leery in buying into that argument. So,
what kind of a person are you looking for? I mean, showing up for work and being dependable is more valuable today probably than ever before.
It is. And I think that the other thing that you need to remember is that college education has put you in a different position, because an employer looks at that you've gutted it out. You've had a goal, you've done the work to attain that goal, and that sets you apart from other job applicants that haven't achieved what you have.
Can you explain how tax levels affect a company's ability to hire more employees?
I'm going to jump here.
There you go.
Without getting into too much detail, there are a lot of corporate structures, and one of those corporate structures that's near and dear to me is called Subchapter S. And Subchapter S is a small business type of corporation. It's primarily used because income, all income, 100% income or 100% of losses pass through to the stockholders. There's no corporate income tax paid. So when a candidate talks to you about liking small business and wanting to support small business, they really shouldn't be focusing on corporate income tax rates. They should be focusing on individual income tax rates. In a C Corp, you can retain earnings. In an S Corp, you can't. So to grow a company, you have to take profits and reinvest them back in the company. And that's why personal income tax rates are very key to small businesses.
And corporation income tax, even though we make a big deal about them here in Iowa, they're a very, very small fraction of the total taxes that are paid in Iowa, usually less than 5%, closer to 3%.
A small majority of Americans pay the greatest degree, more than 80% of all the income tax. So when candidates talk about that, does that resonate with the general voter out there? What does that mean to them?
Well, it sounds good, and I think we go back to what Mark said. It sounds good to go ahead and make that evil 1% pay a greater percent of what, you know, they deserve to pay more. But yet when you dig into the top 5, 10, 1%, most of those people oftentimes are business owners, and so if you're going to punish them, and that's what they're talking about doing, punishing the job creators, you're going to have less of it. You want more of something, you subsidize. You want less of something, you penalize it, and that's what we're talking about.
And we have a heritage, though, here in the United States, especially for the last 80 years, where we use a progressive system to offset some of the just inherent inequalities in our economic system, so that the more affluent are able to compensate and or subsidize the provision of goods and services to the less affluent. That's a philosophy that we've held on to, but sometimes it gets to an extreme and it creates resentment and distrust of government.
All right, Professor David Swenson, thank you very much. Tom Coates, Mark Handewald, just great insight for you three gentlemen. We do appreciate you taking the time to come here to Wartburg College in Waverly. I want to point out again, this entire program is being produced by the students here at Wartburg College. Jackie?
Yep, and that's right. We're going to take a short break now, but don't forget to join our online conversation and share your thoughts about the issues. Go to wartburgcircuit.org/youthvote for the online discussion.
What do you want to be? A doctor? A lawyer? An elementary teacher? A TV producer? Chairman and CEO? You can be anything you want to be with a Wartburg College education. So be orange at Wartburg College.
Well, I first started skating with my friend.
He had an extra board, and then he just gave it to me, and I've been skating ever since. Well, when I don't land a trick and I have my mind set on something, and I'm not getting what I want, I just keep going for it until I get it right. My mom, she didn't go to college, so she wants me to experience that whole thing, and so I could end up getting like a good job. I think to get into college, I'll have to be determined, just like when I want to get a new trick, and skating's helped me realize I've got what it takes.
You're on your way to meet up with friends, but you can't seem to get anywhere quickly. You don't want your friends to be annoyed, so you text. You're on your way. "5 seconds is the average time your eyes are off the road while texting while driving. Make sure you get where you're going.
Welcome back to YouthVote. Just a reminder, you can join our discussion online at wartburgcircuit.org/youthvote. We will be answering your questions throughout the show. We now move to an issue personal to some voters and one that could potentially transform Iowa's legal system.
Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, and Iowa. These are the states that have legalized same-sex marriage. On April 27, 2009, same-sex marriage was legalized in Iowa. The San Francisco Chronicle reported that 4,500 gay and lesbian couples have been married in Iowa since then. This happened 3 years ago, so why is this such a pivotal issue in this year's election? Religious conservatives are continuing their successful 2010 campaign, which removed 3 Iowa Supreme Court justices who ruled in favor of same-sex marriage. This year, the 4th and final judge, Justice David Wiggins, is up for retention. A major opponent of same-sex marriage, the National Organization for Marriage, has been very aggressive against the retention of Wiggins and how the Constitution was interpreted back in 2009. According to a poll done by the Des Moines Register from last month, 49% of Iowans would vote to retain Wiggins and 41% would remove him. Despite the heavy focus on the Iowa Supreme Court justice, the social climate in Iowa is in favor of the LGBT community. In another poll from the Des Moines Register, 56% of Iowans are in favor of same-sex marriage, up from 41% in 2009. The poll also found that 38% would favor an amendment banning same-sex marriage. On a national level, in April 2010, President Obama signed an order mandating that any hospital that receives government funding recognize relationships between gays and lesbians, a major point for same-sex couples in this debate. Aside from religious arguments, same-sex couples are advocating for the same rights that straight couples have, such as tax and Social Security benefits. Compared to the 2008 election, support for same-sex marriage has increased. A poll done by the New York Times found that 62% of Americans support the equal recognition of LGBT relationships.
We're now joined by Molly Tafoya of One Iowa and Karen Thalacker, a Bremer County Magistrate Judge.
Karen is a judicial magistrate here in Bremer County, where we are located today at Wartburg College in Waverly. She's also an attorney, well-known attorney with Gallagher Langlis Gallagher in the Cedar Valley, and the author of a book called The New Lawyer's Handbook 101, Things They Don't Teach You in Law School. And Molly Tafoya is the communications director for One Iowa here in our state, a position she's held since August of last year. And she also has a great background in communications and the LGBT advocacy around the country, originally from Hawaii, where she also worked with Equality Hawaii in its communications department. So we welcome both of you today. What is the role of a state in determining who can marry whom?
Karen, would you like to take that? Sure. Marriage rights are decided on a state-by-state basis.
But the federal government in 1996 stepped in to prohibit the federal government from recognizing marriages, even if a state recognize it, and that's the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA as it's called. So states get to decide, but even if they decide that marriage is okay, the federal government will not recognize the marriage.
Okay.
All right, and we have a question from our studio audience, and this is Carolyn.
My name is Caroline Levy. I'm from Valley High School. My question is, if we have a separation of church from state, how could the Bible be used as an argument against gay marriage?
That's absolutely right. You know, at One Iowa, we advocate for what we call civil marriage, and basically what we're advocating for is equal marriage, equal access to marriage and marriage licenses for gay and lesbian couples as well as straight couples. And so this issue isn't about changing religious institutions. It's not about religious freedom. We're simply asking that if you distribute marriage licenses to straight couples, that you do it equally for gay and lesbian couples.
And in the Varnum case, which is the Iowa Supreme Court case from 2009, the Supreme Court specifically addressed the religious issues and said that the religious issues have no place in the courtroom. And so they weren't going to base the decision based on religious reasons. And a lot of people don't understand that the ruling is limited to the civil institution of marriage and does not cover what happens in your own church.
All right, let's go. We have a lot of questions, great questions coming in from you at home and in the classroom. So Tori, let's go over to you to see what's happening there.
Yep, our next question comes from Valley Community, and they would like to know why we should care about what happens behind closed doors.
You know, that's a great question. You know, what we're at One Iowa, what we're advocating for is equality in marriage. You know, this is really about loving and committed couples who simply want to get married, just like their straight counterparts. It's really as simple as that.
And when the voters really tossed out the 3 members of the Iowa Supreme Court, including the Chief Justice, Marcia Turnus, I think a lot of people were stunned by that. But now there's another movement to remove or retain Justice Wiggins. You represent the Iowa Bar Association, I assume, Karen, in many ways. What is happening there? We've had dueling bus routes going across Iowa on both sides of this issue.
Right. It's been difficult for the judiciary to kind of defend itself because a lot of people don't realize the laws in the state of Iowa prevent the judiciary from being part of the political process. You're not going to see your local judges even at your precinct caucus because they are to stay entirely out of politics. They can vote, but they can't run a political campaign. They're not going to walk in parades. And so when you have a group that is so actively advocating against the judges are in kind of a difficult situation in knowing how to respond to that, and I think would admit that we got kind of caught off guard in 2010 and certainly did not want that to happen in 2012 with Justice Wiggins, and are trying to mount a defense about the dangers of politicizing the Iowa judiciary and then retaliating against the judges for doing the job that we asked them to do. A case was brought before them, the Varnum case. They decided it based upon the Constitution of the state of Iowa, and then to throw them out of office for doing their job really runs opposite to the long history of civil rights protections that the state of Iowa has given its citizens.
Okay.
Can you quickly explain what the Varnum case is?
Okay, the Varnum case was decided in 2009, and it was a couple who was denied a marriage license because they were a same-sex couple, and so they sued the state of Iowa along with some other same-sex couples, and the judges were unanimous in their decision that to deny same-sex couples access to the civil institution of marriage violated the Equal Protection Clause of the Iowa Constitution. Again, we go back to this is a state issue. It was based on the Iowa Constitution, and the judges looked at the Constitution and said there is no reason to discriminate against same-sex couples in the civil institution of marriage.
Let's go back to the audience here. Serafina, you have a question? And tell us where you're from. I think you didn't do that the last time.
I'm Sarah Carey. I'm from West Central. And I'm wondering, are there going to be any changes made towards gay adoption rights?
In the state of Iowa, I don't believe so. National polling and polling here in Iowa shows that Americans overwhelmingly support access to adoption. There are plenty of children out there who need loving homes, and Americans would agree that a partnership between two parents is better than, you know, foster care or the foster system or no parents at all.
Yeah, that's something that's deep involved in our station with the Iowa's Child Program, and Karen, you're familiar with that too. So we've had foster parents who are both men, and we have had both women. I mean, so this is a situation where the fact is finding a loving home is paramount for the kids, right?
Exactly.
But I do think it's been an evolution. People didn't always feel that way.
That's right.
And so this is an issue where people are evolving in how they view the rights of gay and lesbian couples.
Good point.
All right, thank you. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this discussion. We'll come back to you after. When we come back, it's time to the candidates to weigh in, meet the members of the Iowa Republican and Democratic parties.
We're going to discuss the national election, of course, coming up here in less than a week, and of course the all-important race right here in the 1st Congressional District, the newly revised Congressional District. It's totally different than it was a few years ago. So we've been saying, please join our online discussion. This is important. We want you to take part in this 90-minute program here at Wartburg College. So go to wartburgcircuit.org/YouthVote. I know that's a lot, but you can find it. Just do a little, what do they call those Google searches there, Jackie? Is that it? Okay.
So make sure to send in your questions for our political representatives who will be joining us in a few moments.
A few decisions in life are big. Your first car, your dream home, your career, who to share your life with. The best choices feel right in your heart and make sense in your head. Choosing a college belongs on that list too. These big decisions, the life changers, are best when they promise dependability, stability, and possibility. Wartburg College promises all three. Like the mighty fortress for which it's named, Wartburg has weathered the storms and withstood the test of time. When others falter, Wartburg builds anew. When uncertainty rocks the world, Wartburg stands strong. When others lose their way, Wartburg remembers its core values. Do something right for your head and your heart. Choose Wartburg College. Leadership, service, faith, learning. Wartburg College. Online at wartburg.edu.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. I'll teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
What do you want to be? A doctor? A lawyer? An elementary teacher? A TV producer? Chairman and CEO? You can be anything you want to be with a Wartburg College education. So be orange at Wartburg College.
Welcome back to Youth Vote. We will now be joined by Matt Strawn of the Iowa Republican Party and Ben Lang, the Republican candidate for the House of Representatives, District 1.
And to all of our audience here live in the studio here at Wartburg Television and at home, this is your chance to talk directly to those representing Iowa's Republican Party. And our first question is going to, let's see. Matt, do you want to take one?
Well, can we hear the question first?
Let's talk about this race in general. For the Republicans, the polling with the Register, for example, and 4 other newspapers coming out favoring Mr. Romney here for the first time with the Register in 40 years. They've endorsed a Republican candidate. That was shocking to a lot of people, I think, and not necessarily because it's Mr. Romney, but because the Register has been going back to for 40 years endorsing Democratic presidential candidates.
Well, I think it shows the momentum that exists in Iowa for Republican candidates. They understand that the Republican policies are the ones that are going to put Iowans back to work. Republican policies are the ones that aren't going to keep spending money we don't have. And when you have some, newspaper even like the Des Moines Register that, leans to the left, there's no question about it, recognizing that despite the president's best efforts, he has failed and his policies have failed. And the fact that Iowa, we get to see these candidates up close and personal during the caucus process, the fact that Iowa's 6 electoral votes during the general election could very well determine who the next president of the United States is is something that is really unique and special.
And this is a new district. Ben, this is a rematch between you and Congressman Braley, but the district is different. So you guys have been working so hard, both of you, both the Democratic side, both the Republican side, to make this race one of the most important in the country. Where does it stand right now?
Well, you're right. Because of redistricting, the lines have changed. And so 52% of that district is new, as you know. And so that traditional power of incumbency isn't there. So I think it gives Iowa voters out there an opportunity for a fresh start. Someone that they may not have known before, and that they can go out there and cast their ballot. And so we're out there literally going town to town, city to city, county to county. We had 7 stops yesterday, started in Cedar Rapids, through Denver, up to Osage, and finished in Decorah last night. And we'll be doing that all the way through the end of it here, all the way to Tuesday. And I think what people appreciate about the work that we're doing is that we're taking the time to come to their town. And more importantly than talking to them is listening to them. That's what we've been doing over and over again. And as you know, the recent polling shows us that we have surged to the front here by 1.5 points, but that's kind of like taking the score of a baseball game at the 8th inning. You got one more inning to play here, and that's exactly what we're going to go out and do.
Okay.
All right, and next we're going to go to a question from our schools, and Tori has it.
Our next question comes from Allison from Valley Community, and she says that their school is contemplating the whole grade sharing and wonders what you see for the future of rural schooling in Iowa.
Good question.
Well, I'm a product of the rural school here in Iowa. I went to East Buchanan High School. I grew up in a town of 499 people, so I understand the importance of education that it plays. I was the first in my family to graduate college, and we want to make sure that folks in these communities, in these rural communities, have the ability to get that education that provides them the leg up, and that they can be part of that working class so they can provide for their families. And I think one of the topics that we're always talking about when it comes to education is allowing local control of those decisions. Because what we're seeing right now is a growing bureaucracy from the federal side, where my mother-in-law, who's a teacher, and my sister-in-law, who's a teacher, spend more time filling out paperwork, complying with different types of regulations from the federal level, than actually getting to do what they want to do best, and that's teach the kids here. So what I say is, let's shift the policy decision making in the education from the federal level down to the state level down to the local level, and let's let those people closest to those children make those decisions on how to best educate their children, whether it's whole grade sharing or any other possibilities that they think is best for their children.
Okay, we got some great questions from the audience right back here. Let's go. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from.
Hi, my name's Amy. I'm from Reno, Nevada, and I go to Luther College. My question is, how do we make college more affordable and accessible to students while maintaining the prestige of a college degree?
Yeah, well, I think I'm a walking example of this. I had to borrow money to go to school, and as I said, the first in my family to graduate college with it. And I think what we want to do is make sure that all of us, everyone, has the opportunity to afford that next level of education. And what we're seeing right now is, because of the way that the system is functioning, there are more dollars flowing into the system, but as a result, tuition continues to go up. You all know it. You feel the price of that with fees and tuition increases. So we got to have some top-down control from the institutions as well, some incentive for them to hold their prices down, because even though aid may continue to rise, the cost of education is going up, and that's essentially pricing us, the working class folks coming from Quasquet and Iowa, out of the market with it. So I think there needs to be an incentive for the institutions to compete, and I think what we can do is allow other schools across this nation, as well as here in Iowa, when they start to compete from a competitive cost structure, then I think we will better be able to, send all of us here from rural Iowa to that next level of education that gives us the leg up when it comes to getting jobs out there in the economy.
And Matt, when the Republican Party talks about these young people, we're talking at a program here on KWWL and on Wartburg Television, 18 to 25, that is a big voting block. What do you say to these people about what you're doing for them to help them?
Well, the first thing is, we need to make sure that we still have access to affordable and quality education at all levels, not just secondary and post-secondary education, but we need to make sure that we have a strong community college network. We've got to realize not everyone is going to go to a 4-year college, and we've got employers, manufacturers all around this state that are having trouble finding a skilled labor force. So we need to make sure that we're training workers who maybe aren't going to go get a 4-year degree at a place like Luther, where Amy is. But what we also need to do is make sure they understand why Republican philosophies empower the individuals. For example, everybody in here, you're only limited in life by the talents given to you by your Creator, and it's your job to go out there and produce something and do that and follow your dreams and follow your passions. And it's the Republican policies that believe that you are limitless in your opportunities. When you look at the policies that come from the Democrat liberal philosophy, they want to start charting every aspect of your life. It's Republicans that believe in that individual freedom to go out there and chase your dreams. Now, and that permeates through whatever policy we have, whether you want to start a business, but the fact that we have half of our graduates from colleges now either can't find jobs or they're not working in a profession in which they were trained to is something that should not just scare you, but it should frighten your parents as well, because they have saved, many of them have saved to either try and help you get an education and go pursue your dreams or not. So from a Republican standpoint, I think that's the message that we take to not just students, but quite frankly, anybody at any level.
Okay.
Ron, if I may say to that as well, is we've been spending a lot of time going to high schools, senior classes, to talk to those first-time voters. Spent a lot of time at community college as well as colleges throughout northeastern Iowa, and really talking to them, because these folks are the ones that are left with the price tag that is taking place from the federal government side with the $16 trillion in debt. And I say our generation because I always remind folks that I'm closer to their age than I am to my opponent's age. And we're the ones left paying for this. And so I think it's important for all of them as well to understand that everything has a price tag with it. And as a result of that, we want to hold these politicians accountable when they start to pass certain types of legislation, that they know the impact that it's going to have on our generation.
Okay.
All right, we're going to check in with some schools watching in the classroom, and Tori has another question.
Yep, this is a little bit of a different take from where we've been going, but W.C. Maynard asks, what are your thoughts on the Healthy Kids Act?
Well, I'm not familiar with that particular piece of legislation, but obviously when it comes to health, health, my wife, I get a kick out of it. We have 3 young daughters, and my 3 girls like eating kale chips, and I'd never eaten kale ever in my life. That's a healthy food. It's a superfood. But the point being is we want to allow people to make healthy decisions at home, because you see that develop throughout their life cycle. They start making those decisions, and not only does that have an impact on them, but it has an impact on all of us as consumers, because if everyone's healthier, then we have the ability from an health insurance standpoint to pay lower premiums because everyone's in better condition. And so, but I really think it's got to be from within. It's got to be at the family level. It's got to be at the local level. That type of structure is what's going to best promote healthy choices out there for children.
And Matt, I was going to say, Iowa has a Blue Zones project going on right now, which is going to be very significant as far as the health of our entire state, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's been a top priority of Governor Branstad. In fact, I was joking before we came out here, the last time I was at Wartburg, I was a senior in high school for a cross-country camp, which was about half the size of me. But the point of this is, the better you have nutrition for the kids going to our schools, the more they pay attention, the better they do in school, the better opportunities they will have to be educated. So we need to make sure that especially those hungry kids who can't afford a lunch, have a healthy lunch, have a breakfast, have that start that some of us that have families that are maybe a little better well off, have that advantage. Everybody needs to start that morning at the schoolhouse, whether you're a kindergartner, whether you're a senior who's getting ready to graduate, with the same level playing field to go start and chase those dreams.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and our next question is coming from our studio audience.
Hello, I'm Craig Gowerke from Wapaka, Wisconsin, and I attend Wartburg College. Mm-hmm. How would you approach a natural disaster like the one that's happening right now, Hurricane Sandy, now, before it happens, during, and after?
Yeah, well, I think it's certainly a concern what we're seeing take place in the Northeast now. We've seen it take place with Hurricane Katrina as well in New Orleans. We want to make sure that the federal government's FEMA is prepared and ready to respond to natural disasters like that. But I think it's also important that states take the responsibilities to make sure that their citizens, their government is prepared for these types of events, because natural disasters in Texas may be different than natural disasters in New York. And as a result of that, each state may have a specific set of needs that they need to be prepared for. I think overall it's the job of the federal government to be there in times of need when natural disasters strike, whether it's financial assistance, whether it's emergency management assistance, and so forth. But I think we really want to make sure that states are preparing themselves, because as I said, there's different unique sets of needs across this country.
And I don't know if anybody in here, is from Cedar Rapids and went through the flooding in Cedar Rapids a few years ago, but what was really interesting about the response of the community came together. And I think this is a lesson that not all decisions and solutions always come from the federal government. There's something uniquely American. I mean, look at what happened in New York and along the Eastern Seaboard last night, where you had nurses who were trying to rescue people out of a hospital where the power was shutting off. I mean, Americans pull together. and they take care of their own in times of crisis. Now, we still have to have that strong federal safety net to do the recovery and to do some of those things that, quite frankly, the government has a responsibility to do. But I think one difference when you see the Republican and Democrat parties, we believe that a lot of things that should be done with volunteer efforts and done locally, those should be done, and then when we need the federal government to step in and help, they're there to do so.
And we went through this, and this was really devastating 4 years ago, and with the way the state has come back. In fact, FEMA just, of course, as you know, approved the funding for the University of Iowa, which everybody was waiting down there just on pins and needles to get that. Tori, what do we have coming in?
Our latest question comes from a viewer here at Wartburg College, and they would like to know if you can comment on Romney's suggestion that students borrow money from their parents for college, and what about families who can't afford that?
Well, again, I think the real sentiment is how do we allow families, for example, like mine, where we come from a small town where we don't have the resources necessarily to pay for it with cash. How can you do it? And I think what Governor Romney was saying is, go out there and take the risk, try and find the resources, whether that's through Pell Grants, whether that's through loans, whether that's through other types of grant sources. Go out there and take the risk to get that education, because as we all see, education is the opportunity. It's the ladder up to making sure that you can provide for yourself and your family. And so from my perspective of it, it's just making sure that we have the ability to do that. And I think right now I'm a walking example of being able to do that. Because no one in my family had ever graduated college before myself. And so it's possible, it's hard work, it's not easy. And I think what he was saying is he was encouraging folks, whether it's borrowing from your parents or borrowing from an institution or wherever, make sure that you go out and take that risk to do it, because it's your leg up.
And there's no question. I went to the University of Iowa, so I'm a Hawkeye. And I reffed intramural sports when I was in school. I worked at a deli in the grocery store in Iowa City. We found ways to not just cover tuition costs, but you still need a little change in your pocket to go out on the weekends. College is college. But you figured out a way to get it done. And it's not just how do we control, or not necessarily how do we just make sure you have the resources to go to college, but how do we keep those costs down? And we need to ask hard questions of our universities and colleges as well. And Ben talked about it earlier about putting the consumer in charge of it. Right now, as your parents and yourselves are putting financial aid packages together, the university has all the information as to what kind of resources your family has. There's no other business that operates that way. If you go into Target today to buy something, no matter how much resources your family has or doesn't have, you're still paying the same price for a product. That's not how college works. College will tell you, okay, your family has this amount of resources, so we can help to this degree. The person coming in the door behind you that's going to get the same education may well get a different package. And that doesn't put the consumer in charge. It puts the seller of the product in charge. And that's something that we need to take a look at as well.
Okay, Jackie.
All right, and now thanks for everyone for their questions, but now we're going to leave time for statements from both of your guests. So, Mr. Lang, you have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I certainly appreciate to come to Wartburg College, and to talk to a group of younger voters who I remind again, I'm closer to their age than I am to my opponent's age. And look, it's time as Iowans that we lead on this issue. We need a younger generation that is prepared to go to Washington, D.C. and lead on these topics. Lead on what we're going to do with the national debt. Lead on what we're going to do to grow this economy. Lead on what we're going to do when it comes to real health care reform. Because as all of you know right now, the concerning part is that over half of college graduates are struggling to find work, either unemployed or underemployed. You take all this time, you invest your time, your energy, and your resources into getting that education. We want to make sure that when you go out there, you have that job. You have the ability to provide for you, yourself, your family, and so forth. And I think it just comes down to a mindset. We can either continue to send these same politicians back to Washington, D.C. We've seen it before. We'll see it again. It'll happen over and over and over again unless we stand up. It is on us. And I say to all those young voters out there that there is an opportunity to vote for someone that they can believe in. Look, I'm not naive enough to think I can change the entire system, but I still think one person can make a difference. One person from Quasqueton, Iowa can make a difference. And I'm asking for your support here, and I've come specifically here to Wartburg because I want you to know that we take the time to come here. We take the time to come here to talk about these issues because it's going to impact you, your family, and your life. And I'm asking for your vote come November. And I'll tell you what, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. I can tell you that. But it's also it's very important that a younger generation get involved. And you know what? I think there's an opportunity to finish this job that we started 2 years ago.
It's also a very, very expensive endeavor.
Yes, it is.
Probably the most expensive in the history. Okay, Matt Strawn, your final thoughts here for the Republican Party.
Well, first, thank you for being involved. We have a very unique opportunity here in Iowa, not just during the caucus process, but during the last days of the general election, where we all get tired of the TV ads, we all get tired of the telephones ringing, trying to get you to support a particular candidate. But just know that hardly anybody else in America gets a front row seat to have this kind of say in who the leader of the free world is. And we look at the challenges that face our country. We're an incredible country. I mean, the reason we're still a country where people from other nations risk life and limb to come here because they see America as one place where we don't guarantee an equal result at the end of the day, but we guarantee an equal opportunity, that you are only limited in life by those risks you take with the gifts you're given. And with Governor Romney, with Ben Lang, with the entire Republican ticket, we believe in you. We don't believe that there are artificial hurdles that should be put in your way by increased, when you hear about government regulation, taxation, think about the small business maybe you work for over the summer. They need certainty to create jobs, and those jobs are done by people that take risks. And we need to have policies across the country that make it easier for people to take risks. So someday, right now, you may be working for somebody during the summer into the fall to help make ends meet or a little extra spending money. But someday you want to own that company, right? And you want to hire people. And you want to be sitting in this seat 20 years from now talking about, hey, you know what? I believed in those Republicans because they believed in me. So there's one party out there that believes that you are only limited in life by those risks that you're willing to take. And we're going to do everything we can to create an environment to foster those risks so you get educated and then you have a chance for the kind of life that you believe you're entitled to lead. So thank you, Ron. Thank you for putting the forum together.
Well, listen, I'll tell you, we appreciate you guys taking the time in, Matt Strawn, Ben Lang. A great race. It's a rematch of 2 years ago. It really is a very close race, and we expect it will go down to very late next Tuesday night, as it was a couple of years ago. And you have a chance to make a difference, you young people getting out there and voting and making sure that you exercise your right to vote. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time on your very busy schedule to come in here to Wartburg College today. Jackie?
Yep, we're going to be back in 2 minutes, but don't forget to send your thoughts to our online conversation. Next, we'll be joined by important players in Iowa's Democratic Party, so let them hear what you think.
What do you want to be? A doctor? A lawyer? An elementary teacher? A TV producer? Chairman and CEO? You can be anything you want to be with a Wartburg College education. So be orange at Wartburg College.
Can you consent with me? Imagine what you'd see if every child had a book to read. 'Cause every kid across the nation deserves a book to read, and we can make it happen right now. No, I don't know what you've been told, but kids with books learn so much more. So the mission is for us to get a book to each and every child. So let's join hands, book people unite, unearth hidden passion. Come on, we'll have a good time. Plant seeds of inspiration to motivate some magic. To change the writing on the wall, writing on the wall. And make a difference. One book can inspire a child. One book can be the first thing that helps to change a life.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
You're on your way to meet up with friends, but you can't seem to get anywhere quickly. You don't want your friends to be annoyed, so you text. You're on your way. Five seconds is the average time your eyes are off the road while texting while driving.
Oh, okay.
Make sure you get where you're going.
Welcome back to Youth Vote. We now move to the other side of the aisle for discussion.
That's right. We've heard from the Republicans. Now we're joined by the Democratic representative. Sue Dvorsky is the chair of the Iowa Democratic Party here in our state, and Dave Nagel is a former Iowa congressman. And Bruce Braley could not be here today because of a previous engagement, so former Congressman Dave Nagel is joining us here today representing Congressman Braley. I would say before we get going that Congressman Nagel, if you're not familiar with his background, he is probably perhaps one of the most significant people in saving the Iowa caucuses as being first in the nation. This goes back a number of years, but a lot of people forget that Dave Nagel at the time was fighting for not just Democrats but for Republicans too here to keep Iowa's status as being first in the nation, a very significant part, and I think people certainly owe a debt of gratitude to him to do that as far as keeping Iowa's first in the nation status. Very, very important to us overall.
And Ron, let me mention that Matt Strawn, the Republican chairman who just left, did a tremendous job this last year.
Exactly.
In keeping the Republican caucus first in the nation. There's one thing that Democrats and Republicans clearly agree on is we like being first in the nation. And Matt did a tremendous job and deserves recognition for it.
He certainly does. Very good. Way to go. Jackie?
All right, so can you explain what kind of things is your party doing to encourage young voters to vote?
You want to take? I'll take it.
You go right ahead.
First of all, thank you, Wartburg. Thank you, Jackie and Ron. Thank you, KWWL. And thank you, Keystone AEA. Back in the day when I had honest work, I was a special ed teacher in Iowa City for a very long time. So I am a huge fan and supporter of the AEA system and understand how important it is. So thank you and welcome to the students at home and in your classrooms. It is not a secret that President Obama's campaign is focused like a laser beam on expanding the electorate. It is how we won in 2008. It is how we will win again in 2012. We are going out to find voters who aren't already locked into the system. And so we just finished a 2-week statewide campus takeover, hashtag campus takeover, where we stormed dorms and we were all over the state with field organizers, with volunteers, campus by campus, to talk to young voters about how critical it is, if they could vote in 2008, how critical it is that they vote again, and if they had not voted then, what is at stake in this election. And so we are, that's not a secret. This is not a secret weapon, that you are that secret weapon for us.
All right, Tori, what's happening? We're getting a lot of great questions here this morning.
All right, yeah, we just got our first one from Wartburg College, and they would like to know what do you tell people who say that their vote won't count?
So we're 7 days out, and I will tell you that in the famous number, it's coming up all over Facebook, all over, 537. 537 votes is what separated in Florida Vice President Gore and President Bush. 537 votes. Your vote counts. In 2008, which everybody now talks about, it was just this blowout year and President Obama came in, 87 votes per precinct in this state. 87 votes per precinct in this state is how Barack Obama won Iowa. In what now everybody tells you was a blowout, it was 87 votes per precinct. So there are roughly 2/3 of that number in this room right now. You all know 87 people. You all have more than 87 friends on Facebook. You all have more than 87 Twitter followers. And if you take out your parents and your grandmother because you don't want them to, maybe you don't want all that. I say that for my daughters who are, I'm sure, following this on Twitter right now. 87 votes per precinct. Every single one of these counts. You live with huge privilege in a swing battleground state. We are a third Republican, we are a third Democratic, and we are bigger than a third, a little bit bigger than a third, people who are involved but register no party. Of those no party voters, about a third of them lean to the left, about a third of them lean to the right, and the other third in the middle. So every single one of your votes, your commitment, your energy, your thinking about this, every single one counts.
Dave, you have won and lost close elections. What are these young people thinking when they go into the polls and make that decision?
I lost in '92. There was redistricting. That's when my congressional career came to an end, and I lost the closest congressional race in the country. Something like 1,000 votes out of 160,000 cast. And we were up to it 4 o'clock in the morning waiting for the final results to come in. And you think boy, if I could have just done 2 more plant gates and got 500, shook 500 more hands at each plant gate. So what do you think people are thinking? You hope they vote, and you hope they realize that I think you do, or you wouldn't be here. Just how critical one vote can be. One vote can turn a legislative district turn a county supervisor, turn a United States congressman in, or not congresswoman out. So, you know, it's just vital. And the worst thing is that people that come up to you after the election say, gee, if I'd known it was going to be close, I would have voted. And fortunately, I didn't, you know, they're still alive. I didn't strangle them.
And know this, you are in a very, very contentious area for state legislative races. I'll tell you how much one vote counts. The Senate, the state Senate in Iowa. One vote. Mike Ronstall's the face of that, but it was at any time one of them. And so one vote matters a lot.
Okay, good.
All right, we're going to check in with our studio audience for another question.
My name's Damien, and what are your views on the LGBT rights?
Hi, Damien. This party, and it's elected much more importantly than my position on it, the position of the people that we work so hard to elect, is that civil rights are not a matter of majority rule. That is why we have a Constitution. That all means all. And my personal belief is that my marriage to my straight, white, middle-aged, middle-class marriage will be diminished if the many, many people in my circle that I care about cannot enjoy that same choice, or not to make that choice. So what I think about LGBT rights is what I think about rights for people with disabilities, what I think about rights for people of color, what I think about all means all. And that is one of the things that we're fighting for. I will also remind you, if you have not voted yet, that there are two sides to this ballot. Flip it over.
Okay. I don't think there's any question that Congressman Brady stands firmly behind full civil rights for all citizens, irrespective of any kind of a classification that you could possibly contemplate. There was a line in President Kennedy's inaugural address that just kind of passed people by, but now in history looks more important. His goal, he said, was to make the world safe for diversity. The President recognized that diversity means that we get the best minds from all directions focused on the solution to our problems, and that we don't categorically exclude somebody because of their ethnicity or their sexual orientation or because they're a man or a woman. And I think that this country's strength, in part, comes because we've always had diversity. But I think we can do more to enhance diversity. And I think when you enhance diversity, when you give full rights to all people, when you don't categorize, when you don't discriminate against them, then I think the country ultimately is stronger. And I think Congressman Brady feels very, very strong about that.
All right, Tori, another question?
Our question comes from our online conversation, and their concern is that both parties are blaming the problems on the other, and they would like to know why the parties can't work together.
You know, Dave talked about at the very get-go, Matt Strawn and I worked together for a year and a half. I think, and really and truly, one of the things that I think is at play now with these legislative races and with the federal race is an argument that says people are tired of not working together. The extremism on both sides, I don't think it's going to win this time. I really think that when you talk about a balanced approach, that's how Iowa government has always worked. You identify the problem. It's set up to work this way. You identify the problem. I may come at it from here. You come at it from there. We chip away until we fix the problem and we move on to the next problem. That is how Iowa government has always worked. This last couple of years, it has been dragged to a more extreme position. But honestly, I think when we finish up next week and we look at what's happened, I honestly believe that more balance, more pragmatism, and more problem solving is going to win this election. I believe that because I've watched for 2 years, at least on the ground here in Iowa, how difficult and divisive extreme positions are. That building in Des Moines just isn't designed for that. It doesn't take that weight. So I think what's going to win here is balance, but I'm being hopeful.
I was in the Congress of the United States for 6 years. I was there at the end of an era and the commencement of the new era. When I went there in '87, there was genuine respect among members. There was cross-aisle cooperation. I passed a bill to ban the development of a certain type of nuclear weapons delivery system And my co-sponsor was the most conservative Republican in the House of Representatives, Nagel Dorner, that shook some heads, but that's what you could do in those days. The House is a wonderful place. It's a wonderful institution. It's capable of great generosity one moment and mean and petty behavior the next. It really kind of reflects the country. But I think they're going to have, I hope we've had this fight now. And as Sue says, when the election is over, we can reach back across the aisle at both sides and develop some common consensus legislation that will solve the problem. It depends on what the public does, but I think the public is telling everybody that's a member, and they listen to you closely, that they don't want the bickering in the next session of the Congress, and I hope that comes about.
You know, the floodgates for spending have been opened, by, of course, by that Montana ruling from the Supreme Court, and now we've seen donations topping $2 billion, spending about $5 billion. Did you ever think you would see this type of wanting to win at all costs?
When I won in '86, I was the cheapest congressman in the United States. I spent $360,000, which to me seemed like a mountain.
You wouldn't last a month this year. Yeah.
I couldn't even get on the bus.
And he was the cheapest after he got there. I know him. It's the cheapest thing is real.
Let's go back to the audience here.
Hi, my name is Allie Toll. I am from Madison, Wisconsin, but I go to Luther College. My question is, do you believe social issues are more important than economic issues when this country is in the midst of a depression?
Welcome, Badger, and we are Ohio and Iowa and Wisconsin are now the Big Ten firewall for the President of the United States. So we're happy to have you here. I don't know whether you vote here absentee or in Wisconsin. Either way, it matters. Social issues are economic issues. But I think that they're social issues typically, I think, engender, it is easier to become extreme in discussing those issues. It's my life experience tells me that only real policy wonks can get energized and extreme about tax policy. That the social issues are what kind of inflame these passions. But I think that when we look at social issues, we look at who's going to make choices, say, for instance, about women's health issues. That is not just a social issue, that is also an economic issue. That is an equal pay for equal work. That's an economic issue. It can be turned into a social issue, but it most assuredly affects economic stability in families. So I think that there is a way to talk about social issues and economic issues at the same time. This has been an interesting election in terms of that. You know, it started out being all economic issues and then gets pulled back and forth with social issues. So it'll be in a week, 10 days, we're going to know which of those things trumped, if one of them did, and if they did not, if they didn't stay, you know, hooked together.
Let me, election are about choices. And on this issue, what you say phrase a social issue, there is a clear difference between Congressman Braley and Ben Lang. If you're concerned about a woman's right to plot her own health care, her right to contraception, funding for Planned Parenthood, if those issues are a concern to you and the related ones that go with it, then you should understand that Mr. Lang is not on your side on those concerns. He is a member of the right wing of the Republican Party, and he reflects those views. Now, I don't condemn him for having those views. I mean, he's made his decisions. But if elections are about consequences, so are decisions. And on that issue, I think Mr. Lang is going to be found wanting. I think on the issue of civil rights for all citizens, irrespective of any category.
Okay.
Mr. Lang's on the wrong side of that one. Go ahead.
We want to give you guys plenty of time here. We want 2 minutes each to kind of a closing
For
argument.
some closing
right?
statements. So.
Go ahead, Dvorsky.
Well, again, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. This really is, you know, they tell you this all the time. This is the most important election ever, or this is about your future. And it always is the most important. I believe that it always is the most important election ever, because these things typically don't come in the way the terrible storm came last night to our friends and neighbors on the coast. These things change an election at a time. One vote does matter, one election does matter, but this one, in this one, there is a particularly stark choice. And if Governor Romney, Congressman Ryan are to be believed, then they are going to be moving this country in a direction that is really a pivot away from decades of work on social equality, on rights for people to bargain their own working conditions, on environment, on a multitude of issues. So I would encourage you to study this. This is not me taking, this should not be you taking anyone's word for this. You are smart or you wouldn't be here. You are engaged or you wouldn't be here. So use the tools at your disposal to make your own decision. But know that the decision matters, that your choice matters. It matters to you. It matters to your younger sibs, cousins, people that are behind you that you care about. It matters for your parents and your grandparents. So I thank you for the engagement. It's incredibly important, and it makes, I think I can speak for Dave in this and all of us really, it makes us feel hopeful and it makes us feel confident in our future.
I want to talk to you about Wartburg as I close. Because I served in the Congress of the United States, I was on the Science and Space Committee, overseeing the space exploration, but also science and math education. And we found that when we got to studying where did our physicists and our scientists and our mathematicians come from, they came predominantly from small colleges. We were sending all the money to Stanford and MIT and UCLA and places like that, but we found most scientists could come from colleges where they actually got to see a professor, because a science education or a math education is kind of a lonely undertaking, and so it's very, very important. When we talk about elections and we talk about consequences, when Mr. Lang talks about the mountain of debt, he doesn't talk about a balanced approach. He talks a bit about cutting funding for education on all phases. And if there's one place where we have to be competitive, it's in our science and our math, because that's where our technology generates from. When we talk about choices in education, we have to remember that you can't have choices without funding. You want to know how to strengthen education, college, make it more affordable? You increase the funding for Pell Grants. You don't decrease it, as he proposes. You go back to revolving loans for students guaranteed by the government, not the GSA program that the banks made a min on. And you put your funding where it's important. You invest. When it comes to balancing the budget, you use a proper approach of restraint on your spending side to the extent that you can, and revenue increases on the other side. That's how we got out of this mess in 92, 93 with Clinton. That's how we'll get out of it again. But most important, though, is this. There's an election. It has consequences. I have nothing but praise for you for taking interest and, frankly, for having us here this morning. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Sue Dvorsky, Chair of the Iowa Democratic Party, former Congressman Dave Nagel here representing Congressman Bruce Braley, who had a previous commitment. We thank them, as we did thank Matt Strawn of the Republican Party and congressional candidate Ben Lang. So all four of these people taking the time to come in to talk to you directly. We do appreciate that very, very much. So we're about finished here, aren't we, Jackie?
Yep, and so we're nearly finished, but before we go, we'd like to pass along some final information.
I want to encourage everyone who is eligible to vote to get out and vote next Tuesday. Now, there's a lot of information out there on how you can do this, where you can register to vote. Visit the website we're going to show you here at Wartburg College. It's wartburgcircuit.org/youthvote. Again, I mentioned just do that little Google search if you have to. That's a lot of information there. After the show, we will be posting clips from today's discussion, as well as new information about Election Day coming up next Tuesday, November 6th.
And we'd like to thank all of our panelists today, and thank you to our entire student audience, as well as all of you watching live from your classroom. We'd also like to say a special thanks to Keystone AA and Al-Qaeda, especially Norma. This all wouldn't have been possible without you.
And again, I'll remind everyone, congratulations to the entire crew here at Wartburg College. They were responsible for this entire 90-minute program. I think they did a fabulous job. Have a great day. We'll see you at the polls and on election night in just a week. Thanks for watching.